Hello everyone, welcome back to the Microbiology Made Easy in the virology section. Today we have arboviruses. Thanks for the good reviews, comments, suggestions on different platforms. I've been really inspired and it really boosted my energy to come back more with very important topics for all students all over the world. So today's topic is very important, arboviruses. As the name itself indicates, you should just concentrate on the pronunciation. Arbo. It itself indicates is an arthropod born, and are more stress if you stress they are RNA viruses, and they are transmitted to man by arthropod vectors, hence the name arthropod born or arboviruses. The very important that you have to carry home message today is they multiply inside the insects and establish a lifelong harmless infection in them. As the WHO definition goes by, that they are maintained in nature principally or to an important extent through biological transmission between susceptible vertebrate hosts by especially the blood-sucking hematophagous arthropods, or through trans-ovarian and possibly venereal transmission among them, that is among the arthropods. So I repeat again, these viruses are maintained in nature principally or to an important extent through biological transmission between susceptible vertebrate hosts, mostly the humans, by the bite or of the hematophagous, that is blood-loving arthropods, or through trans-ovarian and possibly venereal transmission among them. Another very important, each slide has been kept in mind preparing for those students preparing for secondary BBS, All India NEET, PGI, JIPMER, AIMS or USMLE. So they basically belong to 6 families. All slides are very important. Please concentrate, worth listening. Togaviridae, Bunyaviridae, Flaviviridae, Rio and Rhabdo. Just you have to keep on revising or reciting in a day, or you just have to put this poster on your wall daily so that at least to the exams you won't forget them. So Toga, Flavi, Bunya, Rio, Rhabdo. Toga, Flavi, Bunya, Rio, Rhabdo. Toga, Flavi, Bunya, Rio, Rhabdo. Just keep on reciting, that goes into your mind and gets impact or imprint in your brain. So in Togaviridae we have this basically, if you just go through arboviruses, any standard books in India, or might be say Javits or what do you call Stites in virology, which have given exhaustive list of viruses and subclassification and different families genera, but I have accumulated the gist or the core members in these families. So I hope that will be really useful for you to crack any question. So in Togaviridae, the most important are Eastern equine encephalitis, Western equine encephalitis, Venezuelan equine encephalitis, followed by chikungunya, Sinbit and Ross River virus. Okay, fine. The very definitely I would go back and give lectures on also mnemonics, how to remember in virology, bacteriology, mycology and your parasitology. There's no doubt about it. But here, to start with, a small mnemonic to share, you just have to remember the sound when the dog runs basically through its hoofs. It produces the typical sound tok 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 toga. So you have to remember that Togaviridae goes by the horse sound when it runs, tok tok toga. So here you have to remember this equine. Equine is a word used when you're talking about the horses, mules, donkeys and their families, brothers, sisters and all. So that should make your job easy. So Eastern equine, equine toga, tok sound. Western equine, Venezuelan equine, encephalitis. Chikungunya is also another thing that is a very important virus that comes in this family, along with Sinbits and Ross River virus. Not that important. Bunya viridae, yes, you have a sandfly fever, Rift Valley fever. Another important is Crimean Congo hemorrhagic fever and Ganjam, which are very common in India. So there are 4 viruses in the family Bunya viridae: sandfly virus, Rift Valley fever virus, the Crimean Congo hemorrhagic fever virus, then the Ganjam virus. Mostly around the Maharashtra, Bihar, Odisha area and all. Flaviviridae, Flavi, the name itself indicates, actually as I told you in mycology also, whenever the word or terminology flavus comes, it is yellow color basically. Aspergillus flavus or Flavobacterium meningosepticum. Here also we have flaviviridae. Here basically the liver is in a very impaired function, producing jaundice. Liver is affected. Therefore, you also have viruses that goes by the name yellow fever virus, dengue, Japanese B encephalitis. Then you have some places like St. Louis, West Nile, Murray Valley. Just remember this, like a valley, a river Nile, St. Louis. Then you have something from Russia, Russian summer spring encephalitis virus. Then you have our own Indian Casinor forest disease. We are going to talk in detail later on. Then you have Omsk hemorrhagic fever. Then the Zika virus, which had an outbreak 2 years, 3 years down the lane from South Africa. Last two, Rio Viridae, the Colorado tick fever virus. You have another tick here. You also have a tick here. That's the reason why it's called orthopod borne. But the most common orthopod borne here are dominated by the mosquito, followed by tick. You don't have fleas and mites over here as you had in rickettsia. Then our own Chandipura virus from India is one member in this family, Rhabdoviridae. Don't get confused with this Rhabdoviridae of the rabies virus. So here also you have a synonym or the same terminology used, Rhabdoviridae. So again I repeat, Stroga, Bunya, Flavi, Rio, Rhabdo. Then you also have a robovirus, which is a sixth but not important from exam point of view. Arbovirus is common in India is a very important question asked during Vivas and your MCQs. When talking about hemorrhagic group, you have dengue, chikungunya, and Casinor forest disease. When you have an encephalitis group, common in India, you have Japanese B encephalitis, West Nile, Sinbits, rare, Ganjam, Vellore, Chandipura, Banja, and yellow fever is luckily not found in India, very common in US. Yeah, let's go back to some image-based questions which are normally kept in your All India NEET examinations and all, and they try to identify what these mosquitoes and all. In fact, 3-4 years down the line, continuously this question was coming back to back. Can you identify this mosquito? 4 options are there, whether it's an Anopheles mosquito or a Aedes aegypti mosquito or a Culex mosquito. So here 4 vectors are something to do with the orthopod vectors. Here are Aedes aegypti, which is a tiger borne, which is alternate bands of white and black bands. Then you have hard ticks mostly as vectors. Then you have the Culex mosquito or Japanese B encephalitis and then you have your sandfly valley fever. Then you have coming to the vector borne. If you are talking about what are the different arboviruses that spread through mosquitoes or ticks or through sandflies. Through mosquitoes, you have Japanese B encephalitis. It might be a Culex mosquito, or it might be Aedes aegypti, which is Aedes aegypti mosquitoes are very common. Japanese B, dengue, yellow fever, St. Louis, eastern, western, Venezuelan equine encephalitis. Talking about ticks, the Crimean Congo hemorrhagic fever is caused by a tick, KFD is caused by a tick, Russian summer spring encephalitis, Colorado tick fever virus, Sicilian sandfly fever, Rift Valley fever. The reason why I have kept each and every slide, because through the years have been found that questions have been coming all from these 4 previous slides which I am talking about. It could be like basically the orthopod vector borne, or it could be basically the most common in India, or it could be basically the hemorrhagic group, or might be the what do you call fever oriented group. And like the entire pathogenesis of many arboviruses I have summarized here. It basically bite is a source, and it affects the reticuloendocrine system, the lymph node, lymphadenopathy, the liver, spleen is affected. The same what happens in general virology, which you have learned, the primary viremia, then the secondary viremia, transported into the transport organs. What is very commonly found in almost all arboviruses is to get when things very clear and your cobweb what do you call squash and make it clear is fever and rash. Usually a non-specific, responding to various other viral illnesses, might be a differential diagnosis to other bacterial viral infections. It could be influenza, rubella, enterovirus infections, or any what do you call secondary syphilis or any rickettsial infection. Mostly, and the entire group might be through any vector borne. You have this fever and rash, very common in chikungunya, dengue, sandfly, Rift Valley, Colorado tick fever, Chandipura. It is very, very, very difficult for a clinician to come to diagnosis. When you're talking about orthopod borne vectors, that's the reason why diagnostic help from microbiology would really help them out to come to a conclusion. Yeah, the second clinical syndrome that you would be talking other than fever and rash is encephalitis, which affects your central nervous system, the brain parenchyma as such. Here you have two groups which causes encephalitis, which I have already discussed, mosquito-borne group and the tick-borne. Tick-borne, other than fever and rash, you also have Russian summer spring encephalitis, as the name also suggests, Eastern, Western, Venezuelan, St. Louis encephalitis, and the West Nile, Japanese encephalitis, Murray Valley encephalitis. Good. The third syndromic approach, hemorrhagic fever, where the capillary endothelium is microvascular leakage will be there because of hematochromatic values going up, and something called that antibody dependent enhancement, which we're going to talk later on when we're talking about dengue. Here again you have two groups, mosquito borne and tick borne, which produces hemorrhagic petechial hemorrhages and all. Mosquito borne we have chikungunya, yellow fever, dengue, Crimean Congo. Tick borne basically you have Kessner forest disease, Omsk hemorrhagic fever. So every doctor during his training period has to learn about this, worth listening, reciting back to back, discuss in a group, keep on interacting, try to attack or do some MCQs and all, so that you remember exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah, specimens, nothing to worry about. In any suspected arboviral outbreak, I'm talking about any suspected arboviral outbreak, giving a history from this area and all. Whole blood can be taken, serum of the patient, CSF if your meningoencephalitis is there, post-mortem, samples like tissue. Fine. Diagnosis consists of basically the serology part. Four basically, it could be the serology, which is again that was the previous slide. I just skipped through the virus isolation part and the direct detection part. As I already taught you in the virology, general virology as such. Serology, nothing to do. ELISA, if you have a ELISA, you can do an IgM or IgG, which tells you whether it's a acute infection or it's a chronic or a past infection. It has its own significance. We're going to talk about that later on when we're going to talk about some important viral outbreaks. Yeah, most common animal use is suckling mice, intracerebrally inoculation, and it's the most sensitive method. Where also you can use different cell lines, including mosquito cell lines to which is called xenodiagnosis, vero cell lines, and baby hamster kidney cells. And this growth can be appreciated after inoculation cell lines by immunofluorescence or hemoglobin immunoassay or complement fixation test or ELISA or neutralization test. Direct detection, nothing but you can just detect the direct antigen by direct immunofluorescence again, or nothing, the PCR, the conventional PCR. Serology, yes, most widely used for detection of arboviral infection. As I told, presence of IgM would definitely indicate primary infection, and but only a single titer of IgG won't is very unreliable. That means there has to be a fourfold rise in titers when you compare your acute or your first baseline titers with the second follow-up case or a conventional series, then only the your IgG titers become significant. Yes, false negative are seen when the patient in the seroconversion period when you do this test and is already recovered from this. Then false positive due to cross reactivity with other related strains of this species. Yes, let's talk about chikungunya. The word itself has been derived from Makonde word kunya kungunyala, which means that's bend up. Basically, the patient has so much pain because of the result of arthritic symptoms of disease. He assumes a stooped posture, and if the person who really goes through that disease only can tell you what exactly, you cannot even imagine or share his problem. So it's a re-emerging disease because a lot of mutation has occurred. Even new vector like Aedes albopictus has been discovered other than the most common vector, that is Aedes aegypti, which is a household container breeder and very aggressive daytime biter. Other than in comparative to your what do you call Anopheles or cutex, which are nighttime breeders. Yeah, what happens? Very typical. Arthritis is very polyarticular, migratory, edematous. That is, the joints swell up like a bun, and predominantly affect the small joints of wrist and 6 months. I mean, I heard people saying till it's about to 6 months till 1 year, and still they complain of those nightmares of those pains. Other include headache, muscle pain, tenosynovitis, or skin rashes. Is again very common in other viral infections. What I am going to talk in my presentation is concentrate on the most high yield, high focus area we have to concentrate. So when I'm talking about chikungunya, stoop posture, Polyarticular involvement, small joints face very painful migratory edematous joint swells to posture. That's what you remember. Yeah, how do you differentiate chikungunya and dengue? Because most of the clinical signs and symptoms overlap, other than dengue, in which you have a retrobulbar, retroorbital pain, and like let's see, other than the common leukopenia is leukopenia, thrombocytopenia, retroorbital pain, hypotension might be possible. They are very common in case of dengue, whereas they are not seen in case of chikungunya. Otherwise, rashes, tenosynovitis, polyarthritic involvement fever, all are there. Bleeding is again very common in your dengue. Yeah, coming to the Japanese B encephalitis, yes, leading cause of viral encephalitis in Asia, and so named B. Why? Because there was also to distinguish it actually from encephalitis A, which was called previously encephalitis lethargica or von Economo disease, which was endemic during the time in Japan. And first, this B was first seen in Japan as summer encephalitis epidemics, and now it is very uncommon in Japan. The vector Culex mosquito, especially the vector which is worldwide, including India, is Culex tetanurhynchus. In Vishnui, Culex vishnui is next common vector found in India. In our India, Hindu, you believe in Hinduism, they believe in a god by name Vishnu. Just remember that in India you have a vector by name Culex vishnui, which can cause this Japanese B encephalitis. Transmission cycle, yes, it infects several extra human hosts also, like your animals and birds, like especially pigs, which acts as amplifying host, and atrid birds, which are reservoirs. So as you can see, pigs, the cycle is transmitted among pigs, Culex, then the pigs, then also the atrid or hinoine birds, the Culex again in the animal. So it's in natural, it is transmitted this way. Man is basically an accidental host. So common symptoms, hidden fever, again the same viral stuff, vomiting, diarrhea, lethargy, irritability and restlessness, tremors, convulsions because of involvement of the brain parenchyma. Yes, definitely good news. You have a vaccine, live vaccine, and Nakayama strain was an inactivated or killed vaccine, Beijing strain. So two strains which are by name are the killed or inactivated strain. Live is basically the numbers 14 14 twice. You just have to remember that 14 14 is repeated twice. The numbers remain, but the persons who are discovered are expired, no more. So basically they are killed vaccine or inactivated. You can remember that way just for the mnemonic sake. Yes, let's talking about why I kept vaccine. Live attenuate vaccine is not licensed in India, whereas killed vaccine, it is prepared in Central Research Institute, Kasoli. Yes, coming to the another very important dengue virus. Geographical distribution talking about, then it is more common distributed in the tropic and subtropical, where India has to be in that belt. 4 serotypes were discovered, 1, 2, 3, 4. Latest fifth serotype was also discovered. Please make a note of this if it's not in the books. 2007 years down the lane from Bangkok. Immunity is type specific. That means if you have a infection with type 1, then that means you are immune against type 1. Or if you have infection with type 4, you have immunity against type 4. That is, it means to say it's type specific. Vector again, as in chikungunya, Aedes aegypti here also, followed by Aedes albopictus, daytime breeder. The difference between Aedes aegypti and Aedes albopictus is, yeah, please listen. Aedes aegypti is a nervous feeder, whereas albopictus is a peripheral urban area. Mostly this is in domestic places, and this is in peripheral urban areas. What do you mean basically by nervous feeder is bites repeatedly to more than one person to complete a blood meal. So it is not satisfied, basically like a Dracula, it needs another meal, and hence most efficient vector. So it has to complete its meal so that it keeps on taking turns from person to person. Whereas albopictus is a very aggressive and concordant feeder, can complete its blood meal with only one go, hence less efficient in transmission. Yeah, Aedes become infective only by feeding on viremic patients. That's very important. Not on the normal patient. People who are having that infection, when Aedes bite them, generally from and that this period is very important. What do you mean by viremic period? 1 day before to the end of febrile period. That is the period when the Aedes aegypti bite. Then the Aedes aegypti becomes much infective, so that it might transmit infection to another person. Extrinsic incubation period of 8 to 10 days is needed for Aedes to become infective. See how the nature has. made this heredity that it has to have an spend at least 1 week so that it might be infected to another person. Once infected, but yes, it is infected for lifelong. And simultaneously, it can spread to its offspring by trans-ovarial transmission, like vertical transmission, mother to child. Aedes aegypti can also transmit this dengue virus from mother to child. Transmission cycle, man, Aedes aegypti are the principal vectors and does not involve other animals, as you have seen in Japanese being hepatitis. Yeah, basically patient can remain asymptomatic if his immune system is very good. Yeah, then or it might result in undifferentiated fever where you have to really diagnose. If you have clinical signs and symptoms like fever, headache, retroorbital pain, rashes coming out without hemorrhage, unusual hemorrhage. This is dengue fever syndrome basically. This is like basically a WHO classification. Then you have another fatal condition that is called dengue hemorrhagic fever where the plasma leakage occurs because of this ADC mechanism, antibody dependence enhancing, which we are going to talk and explain you in detail. A very good concept where these viruses or immune complexes which are not digested, type 3 hypersensitivity plays a role. They go and disturb the microvascular system at the endothelium and plasma leakage occurs because of which hemochromatic values increase and there will be a leak and patient goes into dengue shock syndrome. Yeah, this is what I was talking about. So infection with dengue virus induce production of both neutralizing and non-neutralizing antibodies. What do you mean by neutralizing bodies? Antibodies, they are very protective nature. If you have infection with the same serotype, because as I said already that if you have infection with one, you have infection with not same serotype, then you have lasting it for lifelong. But as well as against serotypes which last for some time. But non-neutralizing antibody are heterotypic in nature. They are produced against other serotypes but not against the infective serotypes. Such antibodies produced following the first serotype infection can bind to a second serotype. But instead of neutralizing the second serotype, it protects it from host immune system by inhibiting the bystander B cell activation against the second serotype. Basically, like if you just want me to explain in a very small this thing, if this is the receptors for type 1 and this is your type 1 antigen of serotype dengue 1, then you have the dengue antibodies produced something like this. But if you have uh, serotype 2 which has this kind of presentation, it doesn't bind to the antibodies of dengue 1 antibodies and this is dengue 2. Because of this non-neutralizing or heterotypic nature, these immune complexes do not dissolve or did not neutralize and deposit at the uh, endothelium lining, which causes plasma leakage. This above mechanism is known as antibody dependent enhancement, which explains the severity of secondary dengue infection. Fine. Talking about the severity, which I'll talk you about 2-3 slides from here. Clinical manifestation, as I already told you, there's a big list. You have to have criteria for dengue warning and also for severe dengue. Like you have probable dengue cases where the history of travel is there, patients coming on nausea, rash, aches, tourniquet test can be done where you tie a tourniquet and in this area if you have so many PTK produced over so many square inches then it's positive. Then you have check for leukopenia and nothing get confirmed after you like laboratory test. Whereas warning signs, patient complains of persistent vomiting, abdominal pain, mucosal bleeds, liver enlargement, laboratory increase HCT as I told you because of the plasma leakage. But you also have to see whether this patient is landing up with severe dengue with this, that is dengue shock syndrome or hemorrhagic fever, where this fluid accumulation, the respiratory distress, this patient has to be admitted and electrolyte imbalance has to be checked. Hemodynamic stability occurs, instability that has to be again kept into check. The CNS has to be monitored, the heart and other organs has to be monitored. So keeping that apart, if you really want to have a nutshell of clinical signs and symptoms, incubation period is about 1 to 2 weeks. Sudden onset of fever occur, which is biphasic. Saddleback fever, that's why it's called break bone fever. Dengue is also known as break bone fever or saddleback. Patient complains of severe headache, retrobulbar orbital pain, conjunctival of the conjunctiva, pain in the back and limbs, lymphadenopathy and a rash. Yeah, very important questions. Very important. Believe me, I've seen questions coming on this slide and the following slide. They ask you like which serotype is apparently more dangerous compared to all 5 serotypes. Is this type 2? And which serotype followed by which serotype is more dangerous that can land the patient with dengue hemorrhagic fever and dengue shock syndrome? It is 1 followed by 2. Though all ages are affected, but children less than 12 years are more prone to develop the severity. That is the third condition: dengue hemorrhagic fever and dengue shock syndrome. Yeah, coming to laboratory diagnosis, as I told you, ELISA NS1 antigen can be detected in first week if you're talking about. But again, demonstrated circulating antibodies by ELISA is very useful in early diagnosis. IgG antibodies, I already told you, have to be done in 4 paired sera. 4-fold rise in titers has to be demonstrated. Stripped immunographic test is also used to demonstrate antibodies, but government has not advised this. This is a very important slide. I think I have got it when I attended a national conference on virology in Hyderabad. It demonstrates a very nice flow chart. As you can see, days after onset, 4th day, if you want to really diagnose primary infection, that is by ELISA NS1 antigen is very good, and nothing like viral RNA, which you can detect by PCR. The patient just complains of fever over here. Okay, patient just complains of fever. Basically, this is like window period. And yes, you are talking about antibody titers by ELISA. It will take its own time, like 8 days. And my basically second week IgM rises, and followed that you have IgG rises. This is basically the primary infection. We are talking about this primary infection. Hope you are all following it. But the patient is having secondary infection. Then this is basically the primary immune response, secondary immune response. The secondary immune response would be less with IgM, whereas there will be a sudden or drastic rise in IgG, as you can see over here, a typical sigmoid curve. And again, you can depend on the PCR, the earliest marker over here, and again that ELISA NS1 antigen. So, and risk of severe disease is more when you have secondary infection followed by primary infection, and especially 1 followed by 2. Talking about another slide, diagnostic assays for dengue. If you really ask me which is more specific and which is more sensitive, earlier infection, viremia, I mean direct methods are there, indirect methods are there. More specific would be nothing like virus isolation using cell lines or animals or other methods. And next would be nothing like PCR. Then you can do for antigen detection, that is NS1 antigen. Talking about indirect methods and sensitivity, IgM and IgG, which we're going to talk later on from few slides from. Yes, rapid diagnostic test, you have NS1 antigen, but very poor sensitivity and specificity. Government India has passed an order in 2016 saying that though you do a rapid diagnostic test by immunochromatography or might be NS1 or IgG, but please confirm it by ELISA because it is a notifiable disease. Any lab or any hospital cannot report dengue positive unless and otherwise you notify to government or do a rapid test but reconfirm by ELISA. Yeah, MAC ELISA is the gold standard. I mean, one of the best IgM antibody capture where you use anti-human IgM followed by addition of dengue virus 4 serotype specific envelope protein antigen, which makes the step more specific. And the only limitation is cross reactivity. Other flavivirus is the limitation of this test. It was developed by our own National Institute of Virology, Pune. The other tests which are just to add up on the list but not done routinely is HAI, a complement fixation test, or plaque reduction assay, or a microneutralization test. Treatment, there is no specific antiviral therapy. If you ask me, any virus, might be chikungunya, dengue, Japanese bee, no. Symptom is just symptomatic, and supportive treatment just is replacement of plasmolysis, correction of electrolytes, metabolic disturbances, plasma transmission if it's the need of the hour. Yeah, lots of trials have been done for licensing of the dengue vaccine. You have 2 vaccines, that is chimeric yellow fever dengue, where they use live attenuated yellow fever 17D vaccine. It is available in licensed form, but unfortunately in India it is not available. Approved but in Mexico, Philippines, Brazil, Indonesia, Thailand, and Singapore. It has its own again contraindications like allergic reaction vaccine, immunodeficient people doesn't work out, pregnant and breastfeeding. Coming to the tick-borne hemorrhagic fever, you have a very important in our own South India, Keshanor forest disease. It is the name of a forest in Shimoga. Uh, uh, district in Karnataka, especially more common in Jan to June months. Vector is Haemophilus spinigira ticks, which acts as a vector. It's a hard tick, trans-ovarian transmission among them. Prevention is only by control of ticks, or you prevent yourself from going into this forested area. Monkeys are the reservoir host. Clinical features as same as the other. You have here the first stage hemorrhagic, the rashes coming out on the skin, mucosa, and the viscera. Second stage would be in the form of meningoencephalitis, myalgia, and severe prostration. Yes, you definitely have a vaccine for this, which was prepared in Hafkin, our own institute in Mumbai. That is a kill Kesanor forest vaccine, which is given 2 doses at interval of 2 months, followed by booster 6 to 9 months, and then every 5 years. Especially villages within 5 years of endemic area. Coming to the last, but not the least, rodent-borne viruses, that is the robovirus. That's the sixth family, other than Toga, Flavi, Bunya, Rio, Rhabdo. In that you have genus Hantavirus. There was really outbreak, most common again in US. Virus causes hemorrhagic fever with renal syndrome. Basically the kidneys are involved here, which is also called endemic or epidemic nephrosonephritis. The virus is shed in urine, feces, saliva of rodents, which transmission occurs through humans and rodents. Same thing, ELISA and hemoglobin test would be useful. And this not only Hanta fever, it also causes hantavirus pulmonary syndrome, where the patient will have pulmonary edema. Initially starts with fever, myalgia, malaise, GI symptoms. In severe cases, patient can also complain of tachypnea, tachycardia, hypotension, finally leading to death. The very uncommon or very rare thing is infection is acquired by inhalation of virus arose in the dried rodent feces. Thank you very much. I hope it was worth listening to a very important topic. I hope you keep on continuing giving your suggestions, comments, and please don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video.